I don't need to wear a mask? Apparently not.
discretion.
Okay.
Apparently,
It's
we're going
over.
with it.
Everybody's safe now. It's over.
With a quorum present, I'd like to call this meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee to order at 6:30 p.m. This is a regular meeting for the month of May for the Co-op Budget Committee, and the agenda was posted in advance of the meeting as required. We have suspended electronic and Zoom formats for the meeting, and ongoing we'll be meeting in person. And I'd like to introduce the members present this evening. My name's Darlene Mann. We have Lauren Ridstrom, Matt McGuire, Raul Blanchet, Ryan Rader, Dave Blinn, Cindy Vancona, and Tom Enright. And I'd like to thank Kelly Seeley from our business administrator for attending tonight's meeting as well. If you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We haven't done this in a few months. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'll ask at this time if there are any agenda adjustments. I think we're going to move the facilities assessment to after the discussion of results. I moved it ahead of them because I thought some of the elements would have been related, but I think it's maybe just better as it gets us prepared for the next cycle to just move that after the financial update and the school board update. At this time, I'll appoint a meeting observer, which is Tom Enright, for tonight's meeting. And as a result of the March meeting, the March elections and our April meeting, this is our first meeting since that 9-hour session in April. And at this time is when we typically, first I'd like to congratulate Brian and Lauren for them running for and retaining their seats as we move forward over the next 3-year cycle for them. And at this time, we normally do our reorganization of the committee, which typically involves naming a chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I will ask at this time if we still think the secretary is a necessary item. We do have somebody who does the minutes. So the secretary, if we were to appoint someone to that, would really be if we were to be in like a non-public session, or if for whatever reason some of the minutes, the person doing the minutes was unavailable or something like that, we can certainly vote someone and elect someone in, or we can leave it open and just proceed. And if the need ever came up, we could ask someone to be the secretary. So we can have that discussion, I guess, when we get to that point. So at this time, I will ask for nominations for a motion to nominate someone to the position for chair.
I nominate Darlene Mann as chair.
second.
And
I
Raul
second,
as
third,
co-chair.
fourth.
And Raul as co-chair.
Okay.
Third.
Closed discussion.
Lightning round.
Okay. So.
You were running, right?
Yes.
I'd be happy to. So we have done this in the past where we've just done the slate of seats at once. And so are we all good with not having a secretary identified at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
So the motion on the floor, made by Lauren, seconded by everyone, but I have to pick somebody.
Raul. Raul was the first.
Raul was
I'm
the
the
first
closest
one
one to you.
in. Okay. Well, actually, you were named in the motion, so do you still want to second it?
Yes.
Okay. Seconded by Raul. It was to have nominate myself as chair and Raul as vice chair for the next year. Any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, I'll call the motion to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Great, thank you. I appreciate your confidence in me yet again, and Raul as well. I do, enjoy the work, and I enjoy working with all of you, and I think we have a really good, working relationship as we move forward. So I'm really happy and excited to move forward.
Ditto.
Great. Moving on to approval of minutes. Did I attach a set of minutes? The minutes, I think, were distributed
A long time ago.
a while ago. For the March 25th meeting. I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to really review them, so I can hold that until our next meeting if we want an opportunity to review them.
I would move them.
Okay, Lauren is moving the minutes for our March 25th meeting. Is there a second?
Me, second.
Okay. All those in favor of the minutes as written, just for our own information, Tom and Cindy were absent at the March 25th meeting. All those in favor of the minutes from the March 25th meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Tom, are you abstaining?
Yeah, I'm still thinking, for some reason I thought I was here, but
I don't think I was.
Okay, you can still vote to support the minutes even if you weren't
Oh,
here.
absolutely support.
So, okay.
Because you were not here, but you probably, I'm sure you read
I
it.
watched.
But maybe it is, maybe you are right, maybe it was Tom who
Maybe
was
the two.
absent
I think
and
so.
Dave, I'm sorry, Tom who was in attendance and Dave who was absent. Tom, would you still like to abstain or?
I'll just remain confused.
Okay, okay, leave it at 602. Okay, we have no public presence, so we will move on to the financial update. So the information that I shared with everyone is the most recent revenue and expense report that was shared at the last board meeting, along with some of the explanations and a proposed use of the year-end fund balance. So Kelly, if you could lead us through
Okay.
where we are, where we've been, where we're going, that would be great.
Okay. As you can see on the expenses, if you reviewed the document, we have a lot of positive balances, and that is, I would say, primarily due to the effects of COVID in one way or another. There are many different effects, but all of those positive balances come to a total of $1.7 million as an underrun to the expenses. And then if you look at the revenue, that's a little bit different story. We have a number of revenue opportunities that are in excess of the budget, but they're sort of offset by what's going on in food service, and it's kind of a flip to what you would normally see. The combined total of the food service, local, state, and federal is about $200,000 underrun for what we were expecting to see as a revenue budget. And you'll see on the report that's the federal number. Our budget is $38,000, but what we've actually taken in is more like $230,000, and that's because right now the federal government is paying for all of the lunches for all of the kids, all of the regular lunches, I'll say. So that would explain why when you drop down to the local line and the budget is $359,000, we've only received about, at the end of the day, maybe $25,000. So that $25,000 would represent a la carte sales, because those are not being paid for by the federal government, and maybe some internal catering that the department is doing as well. So in the end, that's sort of a wash on revenue. So we have about $101.7 million in unreserved fund balance at this point. That could actually go up because we still have not resolved all of the encumbrances for the year. So I don't anticipate it going down, but it could go up. And then once we remove the items for FY22, the athletic trust, the maintenance trust, and the retained fund balance, which is listed at its maximum, then we're left with about $1.3 million. And that truly is what we would call, at this time anyway, what is available to return to the taxpayers. And because that number is so large, we decided to offer to the school board some ideas on how they could spend some of that money. Certainly by no means is the document titled Proposed Use of Anticipated Year-End Fund Balance mean that they should use all of that, but that was some options, and we tried to prioritize it a little bit for them to understand what we're looking at when we look at things. So so we have priority 1 through 4 that we gave to the school board. And in that priority is a section called Building Evaluation and Recommendation in priority number 1. And there's $30,000 there that is, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the facilities assessment. But we have the same company that is looking at Brookline School District for their energy study. We have, that's what the $30,000 represents, is that same company coming to the co-op, both buildings, to do a similar study on energy. We've always known that we can save some amount of money on improving the efficiencies in energy. So this will be a formal study to actually put numbers, data together, and then he will provide a recommendation for how we can maximize energy efficiencies. And that part of it is not, there is no cost. They do not charge for that part because they're waiting, they are expecting to get the recommendation to the voters, and if the voters say yes, then that's when they would expect to get paid. But the other $30,000 listed there is primarily to have the same company look at enrollment increases and what we might want to do to the two buildings in the co-op. Because, as Brian can tell you, there's a workforce housing project on the horizon that could become a reality, and that could have, once people start moving in, an immediate effect on the co-op, depending on the ages of the students that move into that housing. So Brookline is looking at that right now in terms of RMMS and CSDA. So it would be wise, and we were recommending that the school board look at that as well.
Question?
Yeah.
Have there been any estimates for planning purposes of how many potential additional students into the system that would bring?
Yes, I can't remember that number. Do you remember it, Brian? I want to say it's like 2.5 kids per
unit.
unit.
Well, we're
I'm
talking
just
about
struggling to
roughly,
remember
what,
how
80 to 100 units?
I was thinking it was about 80 units or so.
So we're talking about 200 students?
Could be.
Worst case, I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
every unit's gonna have kids with
Yeah.
it,
No, I understand.
but still,
But the estimate across for the workforce housing is 2.5 kids per unit.
Right.
A lot might be
Which-
one, some might be four,
Right,
the
and they could
average is
be,
2.5, so
they
that's
could
what
be
they want
low
you to
grades
expect.
or higher grades,
And that's
yeah.
12 years of grades, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Do you,
But it's
are there
still-
estimates as when to the housing units will be completed?
there's,
Initial
Um,
operational capability for the,
yeah, it's not really clear yet, and the town has just enacted a moratorium on building permits specifically for that purpose, but how well that holds up in court, yeah.
what is the
So,
building
we'll
that's
see.
affected, the one that would build the units?
I believe so. I
Okay.
believe they don't have a permit yet.
Right.
Um,
And
but,
and the town has charged the school district to come up with a plan on how they would address an enrollment increase by, I think it's the end of September, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why we're sort of deep in the middle of this right now.
yeah, it is very early in the process. They
Mm-hmm.
just came to the planning board with this proposal, in March or something, February, I think it was. So it's very early in the process, but,
It's very early on, but I've also
But-
notified through my company of general contracts that are sinking their teeth into this already.
Oh, really?
There's no, you can't stop that, that's where you can't stop
Right.
it. So I heard the builder's gonna actually buy land in Hollis and move it over here. Just
That's,
kidding.
you know, it's interesting you say that because there's already a workforce housing proposal here in Hollis
Oh,
that's
really?
been wending its way through the planning board over the last couple of years.
It's approved, hasn't it been
I
approved?
believe it's been approved.
I
I'm
think
not,
it has
I'm
been.
not
That's the
sure.
thing, you can't.
They've
honestly,
broken
you can't
ground down,
stop
but they're-
it.
They have?
Oh, my
Yeah.
gosh.
I wasn't sure if they had
But
started
that's-
it yet.
That's like 26 units, I think I
Yeah.
read or something,
Yeah,
26
so
to 30 or
that
something.
was what my question was gonna be, because similarly in Hollis, aside from that, I mean, the building, just in general, the building in Hollis
Yes,
is,
and that was gonna be
is-
the next thing,
I mean,
because,
at the
This
last,
market is-
Hollis Budget Committee meeting, they were talking about, reviving, the master plan and, starting to evaluate and look at that again, because, when is, I think for a lot of years, things, you had building and construction and things like that, but now, as it's accelerated, you realize, okay, wait, maybe we are getting there now a little bit faster, time to revamp the plan and start to look at it,
right,
because they haven't
Yeah.
looked at it in 10,
Exactly.
15 years or
we also
so.
don't know
So
how
I-
long this boom is gonna last. Is
That's
this
true.
just COVID, people moving out of the
Right.
city, and it's
Right.
happening right now, but it may not happen next year?
Right,
So my
right, so
I don't
my
know.
question was gonna be, if you're looking at that, is it similarly looking at Hollis, while you've been charged directly by the Brookline.
Right.
The town of Brookline to look at the impacts on the schools. Hollis.
We
Hollis-
have not yet been
Okay.
charged with that, so
Because
that's
that-
likely coming.
Because that was, there were some of the comments in support of certain things that were discussed at the annual meeting did talk about the increase in enrollment at the elementary levels
Yes.
and things like that, so
Yes.
for
Yeah,
potential increase.
We're already, at this time of year, seeing huge increases in kindergarten, so,
Yeah.
but the question is that a bubble,
Right,
or
right.
is that real?
Well,
And
What I think you're seeing too is a lot of people, because the market's so strong, everybody's like, people that don't have kids in school, and like, now's the time to sell. And the people that are buying
Yeah.
are young couples with, so you're gonna see
Sure.
that. It's not, this market's it's not gonna be crazy forever. It's gonna drop off because the market's crazy, the materials are going through the roof. So there's builders that I know that are like, with their foundations, and they're like,
Right.
I can't.
So
We'll
it-
outprice ourselves,
So is there a definition of what, to the concept of workforce housing, what that is?
the
For example,
definition?
it surprises me. When I first heard about workforce housing, I estimated in my mind roughly about 100 kids additional to the system. That probably is 3 to 4 people per unit. The units are not necessarily gonna be large homes. They're probably small apartments. When I hear 2.5 kids per unit, now all of a sudden you're talking about at least 4.5 to 5 people per unit. So what is the concept behind workforce housing? What are we talking about here? What kind of a building? How many
Yeah.
people? What are
Right.
what is the plan? What is the vision for the population that's gonna be occupying it? Who's gonna be paying the taxes to pay for this additional cost of schooling for them?
Yeah.
So the
Is anybody,
concept,
can anybody talk to that point?
well,
here
just
in this room?
the concept of workforce housing is just that there's housing that's available that is considered to be affordable, which is to say that the people who are living there would pay a certain, would their living expenses for the housing would be a certain percentage of their income. So basically, something's defined to be affordable based on certain percentage of what the home values are in your neighborhood and what your salaries are in your neighborhood. So for like Brookline and Hollis, you're still talking $200,000 homes. It's still pricey because this is a pricey
But
place.
are these,
That's considered workforce housing here.
Is this like a building you would see in a city, or are these like detached units? What are we talking about?
We're talking about either an apartment complex or possibly condos, but it's buildings with multiple units per building.
And are they gonna be subsidized? Meaning somebody else has to pick up the tab, like you cannot charge
No,
more than
I
a certain
don't.
percentage of what the real taxes
No,
are?
I don't think so.
No, it's not Section 8,
It's not Section 8?
no,
No.
Okay.
as I understand.
Well, I wasn't
No.
implying that it was Section 8, I just wanna understand.
Yeah,
What is
I
it?
don't think there's any
It goes-
tax incentive, so they'd still, if you've developed a property that's, worth $2 million, then you're paying taxes on $2 million for it, so they're paying property taxes for
Right.
it.
So
Okay.
that, so what, the item identified here is an additional, is $30,000 to do that.
The evaluation
Enrollment
for
impact.
enrollment impact, yes. And that 30,000 could actually be 40,000. I'm sort of guessing, I'm waiting for that number to come from them. So it could go up a little bit, but that's about what Brookline's number is, and I anticipate it being a little more for the 2 schools we have here. So second on the priority 1 list is to accelerate the 3rd year of the tech plan. Right now, we were planning to put that in FY '23, so this would just be accelerating that. And the same with the next section for the roof. That section was planned for FY '23, so we'd be accelerating that as well, and that happens to be the most expensive phase of the entire roof sections. And then new to everyone's eyes is the roof replacement for the middle school. There's the oldest section of the roof is scheduled to go into the FY '23 budget as well, so that would be another acceleration. All of these are pretty much accelerations. Under priority 2 would be to complete the window replacement phases. That could be a lower number. We haven't yet evaluated the entire building to get a firm cost on that, but that's sort of an estimate of what it would be to replace the windows that are problematic in the entire building. next year in FY '22, we'll be replacing a few, and this year, we're replacing a few. And then in priority 3, we have mostly paving. The middle school, as I'm sure you've noticed, needs some paving projects completed as you fall through the big hole trying to get here. And then the high school, in FY '22, we have half of the circular drive with an expansion to make that at least passable for 2 cars. We would want to finish that, and that's an acceleration from what we plan to put in FY '23.
So is that as you go up, as you enter?
Yeah, as you
and
go
up
up.
to go around,
Mhm.
where it kind of bottlenecks when we want to like
Right,
branch
so
off
we,
into the
we'd
rear
start,
senior
yeah,
lot.
we'd start where we left off with last year's paving and go up as far as we can for the amount in the budget. And then and widening it as much as we can, so we can try to get 2 cars that could go around if necessary for
Yeah.
emergency purposes.
Yeah.
And then, so this section would be going from the back down. So that would be an acceleration from FY '23 as well. And then really the dirt lot for the teachers and the back lot are in different budget years, but
So the back lot is the big, the part, the
Yes.
big student
Mhm.
lot up in the back.
Right.
And there's no amount for the other lower, the
No.
opposite side lower lots?
no, at this point, I'm not aware that they want to pave that. It may become necessary at some point, but I think that's low on the priority list. And these estimates are truly estimates as well. These are sort of extrapolating to today's prices based on older quotes. So we are in the process of getting updated quotes for everything. And then the last priority is something that Homeland Security has been recommending for several years now, that we were planning to put into the FY '23 budget, and that's the main office, a renovation for the security. I don't know if anyone has been to CSDA recently, but it would be that same concept where you have the very front doors, and then you have the other set of doors. You would be buzzed into the first set. You'd have sort of a bank teller window, which is similar to what CSDA has. Then once the person that's behind that window has the visual on that person, they can see, maybe they can take care of the business right there at the window, or they will buzz them through the second set of doors based on whatever the situation might be, vendor, parent, whatever. So that is what that's all about. And there would be some renovations to the inside of the main office, because we'd be replacing or removing the senior secretary from her office and sort of trading the reception person and the senior secretary, making an office for the senior secretary where the reception is right now.
What value is
So-
that?
I'm sorry?
What value is that?
That's about $86,000.
Okay, and that's been years now, right? That's been rolled over years for
Yeah,
years, hoping
you've
for
seen
something from
that
the
several
government.
times, yeah.
And there was no, I think when we did some of the renovations in other schools, there might have been grants or separate funding available at the time.
I think
prioritize other schools.
CSDA, we definitely took advantage of a grant, but I think that was the only school that we were able to do that with.
So, yeah, from a priority perspective, I was actually surprised to see the security piece be a priority 4.
Yeah, for 3 years, not 4 years.
That was just-
ridiculous.
I think there's a lot of people that would like it higher, but it didn't make that. I won't
So
say
something
anymore.
There are all sorts of strategies you can implement when you're prioritizing.
Right. But I do know, and Cindy can speak to this, that the school board is interested in your collective recommendation or feedback or whatever you'd like to provide, so.
So Cindy, this was brought to the school board at last week's meeting?
Yeah, we discussed it at last week's meeting, and kind of, everybody went around and gave a little bit of what they thought the priorities were. Mostly, the tech plan was priority because it had to do with the students. So that one came out from pretty much everybody. The rest of it was pretty much all over the map. Some people thought paving was more important than, other parts of it. And the question was, at one point, the conversation was, if you did the paving, may not be even practical to try to do more than one piece of it, because you're gonna have the road torn up and, worked on, you can't have the whole thing torn up. But we didn't really come out with any consensus. I mean, it was just introduced to us last, so I'm sure that we're gonna have much more discussion on, in June. We did talk a little bit about the bond though, because I asked for to get a clear, feel before I came here, because we had talked about bonding here, and it also has come up at the school board. I don't think that it would pass the school board to have an appetite for it. No, we didn't vote on it, but a lot of people spoke against it,
Against bonding.
against bonding. Just because it's gonna be like at $1 million, which seems like a lot to go for a bond for maintenance, so a lot of people didn't feel like that, this is stuff that we should have been kind of doing all along. They didn't, and to bond it, then Hollis ends up paying more because it's a bond. So some of the board members didn't feel like that was a fair thing either, so.
Has there been a comparison cost of all those items, bonding versus no bonding? What would you bond, what would you not?
No, I mean, the whole conversation has been all along that pick what we needed to try to bond, but we haven't really picked them. We just keep playing with them. We keep shuffling the deck on them.
Because I think a good portion of that amount of money should go back to the taxpayers. So that we need to I would like to see us at least discuss a nice scrub of not really separating what's really a priority that must be done
Right,
versus everything else.
and that's what the school board is kind of asking for.
And part of the criteria maybe things for the students is a high priority and security is a high priority. And so maybe we need to come up with a plan, and I would not mind perhaps consulting with DPW and Hollis, because they have a roadmap for what they pave and how and what it takes to do paving for the whole town. So maybe we could learn from some of their lessons learned or from their perspective on how would you go about doing something like this. So
As far as the paving, the priority that was most spoken about was the access to be able to get around the building with 2 lanes. I mean, it's definitely a problem. We've been lucky, I think, in some ways, that we haven't had a situation where we've needed fire and ambulance and a bunch of other vehicles trying to get through there around carpool time, because it's impossible to do.
Yeah, see, that one I kind of view, yes, it is paving, but I think it's like the next level up, because there's more involved than just paving. So I'd almost separate that from just paving, fixing the holes.
Yeah.
Kelly, can you share what year 3 of the tech plan would involve?
Oh, I was afraid you were going to ask that. I don't know that I remember exactly. I believe there's a lot of Chromebooks in that.
Yeah. And so
in that
actually, I can
section.
pull up what phase 2 was.
Yeah, if I remember right, it might have been Chromebooks for.
Yeah, I think like, let's see. It's hard. Phase 2. It was social studies, Chromebooks, bio and chemistry at the high school, bio and chem, and world language.
For this
For
FY
this-
'22,
for
right, okay.
22.
Yeah.
And so that was a total of under 400 units of Chromebooks.
And the social studies, though, got put on hold because the state curriculum is changing. So those did not get ordered for this year because of we put those on hold waiting to see what the curriculum's gonna be before. Those didn't get bought, right, Kelly?
For next year? Or
Well,
for-
she's talking about FY '22. I don't know that we've put anything on hold. Honestly, I don't remember.
I mean, we'll have to order them, obviously, but we know nothing from the state yet. So until we get the curriculum from the state, I don't know if they're gonna wanna do the social studies ones right away.
Okay. So it would be similar phasing, like maybe last year or for this year. which would, this year that we're in right now is phase 1, next year's phase 2, then you're looking to move up
Yes.
phase 3. And that totaled 112,000, so it's in that same $115,000.
Right,
range.
because there's definitely been increases to
So the only
machines.
thing I would point out about that is in moving a tech plan forward, then you have 2 cycles of Chromebooks that basically need to be upgraded at the same time.
And that would
5 or 6
Right.
or however many years from now.
And that
So-
would normally be a big concern, but we did buy some of this year's Chromebooks, well, devices, depends on. We bought those in FY '20 with CARES Act money, so they're already
Right.
net by sort of organically different now.
Yeah, okay. The point that I shared with the chair of the school board prior to their meeting, and then the letter I shared with everyone, was just a reminder of the information that was discussed at the annual meeting. So between the public hearing and the annual meeting, Kelly was able to get me some updated information that we were confident that $650,000 would be returned to the taxpayers. An additional $100,000 was not approved, which was the contingency, so that would make it $750,000 returned to the taxpayer. So this amount, the 1.2 million, the 1.7 million, I'm sorry, let me go back. The
1.3.
what is it? 1.4 million. So the projected fund balance after everything, the puts and takes, maximizing retained fund balance was at 1.4 million versus the 650,000 that we shared at annual meeting. So that's about $750,000 more, less 100,000 because we are returning the amount that didn't get approved. So at a minimum, I would still support the not less than $750,000 being returned to the taxpayer. But given that the projected fund balance is so much higher, I'd like some input to, on whether you feel it needs, the amount returned to the taxpayer needs to be something greater than $750,000, or which projects you think warrant being addressed, and so on. So.
I'll jump right in here.
Sure.
As you're aware, and those of us in Brookline are particularly aware, we had a significant amount of federal, state dollars coming in to support education, particularly in Brookline. It was a wonderful thing, but this current legislature seems to not be interested in continuing to do that. So we're looking at a loss of $1.2, $1.3 million year to year. That dramatically lowered our taxes last year, which is awesome. But that loss of that money is going to dramatically increase our taxes this year, which is a big problem. So we're really looking to try to, anything that can soften that blow would be greatly appreciated. We're concerned about that.
As we were looking at the estimates based on the FY22 budget, there was that impact, that dramatic impact for Brookline, and there was also a dramatic shift toward Hollis from a student population perspective, and that's why kind of both communities were seeing larger increases. So Brookline's diminishment of their aid was offset a little bit by the fact that the student population shifted toward Hollis, and that's what was driving Hollis's estimates a little bit higher. Whether that pans out with the final numbers for June, and how that all works as we move forward for tax rate setting time, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so there were both things at work there. And as Brian said, I was going to talk a little bit later about some of the legislative updates, but I believe some of the things we were hopeful for are not things that are going to pan out, like restoring the disparity aid to Brookline and using the figures that were used to determine adequacy for this current year using those same figures again, moving into next year, because one of the other dramatic differences in adequacy aid, not that it's as dramatic for our district, but it is based on free and reduced price lunches, and some of those percentages are off across the state. Again, not as significant an impact here, but one of the other bills also talked about not allowing aid to be less than it was for this year. That one didn't pass either. So we really are looking at that situation with the disparity aid not being renewed, and, you know, just moving forward with the adequacy estimates kind of as we see them now. So. Anyone else on a minimum return to taxpayers?
I
Well, I'd
agree
like
with
to
the
see-
I'd like to say a
750,
few
but should be
things.
even more.
Okay, you think it should be a minimum of
A
750
minimum,
but
that's the
higher?
starting point for discussion, and I think it should be more returned,
Mm-hmm,
but that's the threshold that must go back, I think.
okay.
And we're at 750 against 1.4.
As it stands
Just
now.
wanted to
Yes.
Make sure I had it right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we got some fairly big items here that I think should be approved by the taxpayers. And so the only way to get that done is to take them to the taxpayers. So I think we should return most of that 1.2 or 1.3 and make these budget items and get them approved by the taxpayers.
I agree. The only one thing that I think is the security system, the $86,000 that's been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. Something ever goes wrong, something happens, and now we've got everybody saying, oh, you should have done this 4 years ago. For 86,000, it's not even worth discussing, President. That should be priority one, before the parking lot, before the teachers' parking lot, before anything else. And like Lauren said, the big items go to taxpayers. You're live, telling, all anybody heard is 1.4 million going back to the taxpayer. They're not gonna hear anything else after that. Let's be honest, you know what I mean? So I think it needs to go back to them and let them vote it next year, you know, that's my opinion. You know, everybody's been asking since the start of COVID. You know, like, oh, what are we getting back? How much are we saving? I mean, I'm like, settle down, you know? And now it's been said, there's 1.3, 1.4 million saved, or potential going back to the taxpayers. Available, and that word available is now the only word that anybody's heard,
Sure.
in my opinion. So I think it's a, not dishonesty, but I mean, that's what's the balance is. Next year, we're hoping for this, let's use this money. That's just not right. The security, 86,000, yep. And if the taxpayers don't like it, well, that's their problem. This is about the kids' security, not about a parking lot, not about 2 lanes. And I understand the 2 lanes for emergencies and all that, but it's been 20 years with 1 lane, so let's push it to vote. That's my opinion.
Well, there are several things that go through my mind. First of all, if I had to set goals, I would be happy, reasonable. I would accept $1 million to the taxpayer, the rest of it to maybe help fund some of the highest priority items. I saw the list, but I didn't see definitions between highest priority, medium priority, low priority, nice to have. I mean, there should be some criteria and some rationale for what goes 1 through 2 to 3 to 4. There's usually a more detail provided. So I'm willing to accept certain things that are really priority that we should go ahead and maybe fund now instead of bonding later, or maybe having the voters go through this whole list. Because the problem that I have is if you put something in front of the voters, instead of doing a line item by line item, where they have a tendency to combine things into one package, and it's either take it or leave it, and that defeats the purpose of really discussing each item on its own merits. So, on the one hand, I want to set some goals, some target amounts. I'm willing to accept $1 million for the taxpayers, the rest of it for consideration of the highest priority items. I would like to have some more definition and details behind the prioritization process that went through as to why this is more critical than something else, because we need to educate the voters too as well. And then we'll just have a discussion and go from there.
Kelly, can you speak to some of how the prioritization occurred?
Well, I don't know that there's any super detail I can give you. I think that was just the superintendent's view of what he would do if given the funds based on students, I think, and opportunities, which I think seeing the most expensive section of the roof means we don't have that in the budget next year if we can shift it. So I think it's a combination of trying to maximize the budget for next year by not having these things and what we can do for students.
And one more thing, if we end up deferring to the voters a large portion of those items, then we should do the exercise of comparing the cost of bonding versus just go ahead and putting it in an
Well-
operating budget.
Well, please just note that if we go through with an energy efficient, I'm not going to say bond because it will most likely be a lease because we can do that with energy efficient projects, then you could be looking at two bonds, or a bond and a lease. So I think we would all like to see that lease happen before we'd like to see a bond of a lot of different things. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
So for on like the energy efficiency side, what Hollis has done so far, could you just kind of give everyone a sense of like, well, they did all the air handlers and.
They installed air source heat pumps. They traded out their heating oil boilers. Well, by the end of this project will be both boilers in both schools went from oil to propane. Both schools have solar panels. Both schools have LED light fixtures and a lot of improvements to HVAC or air handling, depending on which school you're talking about, at the end of the day.
So those are kind of similar
Mm-hmm.
initiatives that would
Right.
be evaluated.
Right,
Just
they
to give
would be.
everyone a sense of what was.
Right, they would be, and the good news is some of these same systems that I just mentioned in the high school and the middle school are nearing end of life. So we'd be kind of killing two birds with one stone, taking out those end of life issues and at the same time increasing energy efficiencies. So
Was any of that grant money, or was that all taxpayer dollar?
that was all taxpayer dollars.
Tom?
So I appreciate being able to listen to a lot of opinions before I throw mine up, but I would, I'm closer to Raul and probably the rest, and I would say that two student-oriented pieces that I would support are the tech piece and the security piece. And that's about $200,000. So I'm kind of splitting the difference with some of you who think it should all go back, and thinking that we try to accomplish at least student-oriented and safety pieces.
Warren?
I think a vast majority of it should be returned to the taxpayers.
Okay. Would you support any of the initiatives?
Well, I think the security piece is kind of a straw man. I think that's a given. And then I think that would be it, and everything else should go to the budget.
what do you think, Madam Chair?
Well, the two things I wrote down were the security piece, and I understand that the tech plan is student-based, so I would consider that, but I'm just trying to, I really do appreciate the amount of effort that goes into the phasing of a lot of what we do. It makes it easier to build budgets and have those items not necessarily be replaced by something else. So the thing I'm concerned about in moving so many of these FY23 things, the potential to move all of these FY23 things, is what replaces them. So, there's a lot of money that's, potential. It's 2, 3, 4, 5. It's almost $600,000 to $700,000 that we're basically saying would come off the top of next year's budget. Okay, then that would then become our starting point. Like, take what passed
Yeah.
minus 700,000. And that, I don't know that
I doubt that would
That's not
happen
gonna
that
that's
way.
likely to happen. So, you know, I have a more kind of conservative approach to some of these things, and maybe it's because we haven't seen a list like this in several years.
You
I mean,
know,
we haven't
right.
addressed encumbrances in like 3 or 4 years. I
No.
don't think we've
No.
really come up with anything that was being proposed or put forward. I do feel like that security piece is, again, a priority one for me personally. It has been something we have talked about, and I would like to see that move forward. And if, you know, we have an opportunity to do that and then return the rest, really. As I said, I do appreciate the tech plan, and we kind of bought into the phased approach of it by saying, okay, it's fair, we understand it's a 4-year cycle, and we'll take that. So I'm really kind of focused mostly on the, that security piece, which in this case is a priority 4. But that's kind of
It's
So
the
do you-
smallest budget.
Do you want a motion then?
we could have a motion that, we could put a motion forward, and
For
that kind of
guidance
puts our
for the
stake,
school,
to
is that what
provide
it's-
guidance to
I
the school
would
board.
make a motion that the Budget Committee offer guidance to the school board to return the estimated 1.2 million less the security piece to the taxpayers. That's it.
Estimated it's actually about 1.4 million
Okay.
less security. So I'll just
Should
refer,
we go ahead and put a number?
I'm going to refer specifically to the
I
number.
figured that would get
So it was
done.
1.378 less.
That's why she's chair.
Right?
86.
Again.
So
Exactly right.
that's 1.292. So bearing in mind that, as Kelly said, that number could still go higher
Yeah.
as we close the year. So at this point, based on the May results, the results provided as of May 7th, the Budget Committee would be supporting the return to taxpayer of $1.292 million and encumbrance for the security items of $86,000 for the front office renovation at the high school.
Thank you for
And I hope-
clarifying the motion.
And I hope Dawn can make a motion out of the two things we just said. And so I heard a
She's
so
very
moved
good.
from Lauren
I'll second.
and a second from Brian. Okay,
And I
discussion.
just want to say that 86,000 is a good quote, but right now we're experiencing tremendous increases, so it could be a little bit
Sure.
higher than that.
Right, so, and I
Sure.
think we're both kind of looking at the same side. It could, so by saying kind of the security
Yeah.
piece for renovation.
Thank you.
And similarly, the 1.378 could be a little bit higher
Yes.
too, so.
Yes.
Should we wait till final numbers this year before we?
Well, we could put forward a
Yeah.
motion that's generic enough to support the security piece, because the next time we meet is after the board meets, again in June.
Okay.
And the books won't be closed because you're still kind of
Right,
figuring
yeah,
things out
that's
at that
when it
point.
starts getting.
Can I ask
really
you for a favor? Just quickly run down all the priority 1 items and the amounts to see if I want to perhaps modify the number?
Okay, so number 1, well, the priority isn't in any necessary
right?
order there, but the first thing we have listed is the $30,000, which could be a little higher for the workforce housing and just in general enrollment increases. And then number 2 would be the tech plan, accelerating that, 115,000. And then the most expensive roof phase for the high school at 195,000 estimated. And then the middle school oldest section roof replacement at around 100,000.
So the tech plan and the oldest section replacement is 225, 174. So if we take that number and subtract it from the current number, where are we at?
So you want to take the oldest section for 100, the tech plan for 115, and the security piece, or
Yeah.
not? And the security piece. That's 301, so call it 300,000. So that would return a little over $1 million to the taxpayer.
Okay.
So for the roof, is it, I know it's time to replace, but are there like leaks, and is it something that, you know, every month?
The high
or,
school or the middle school?
Both, I guess. How bad is the roof?
I think they're both experiencing some amount of leaking, but nothing that we haven't been able to repair, but they're showing their age, you know. They definitely need to be replaced in the near future.
And do we know how many years that roof has been in place?
I think that might be, I don't know. It could be original to a renovation, or it could be original, I'm not sure.
So that, and that's been, like, the way we've addressed all the roof pieces is to, like, section it off and
Right,
phase
and I
that
haven't had the
also.
middle school evaluated for, you know, each section, how many sections that is. I haven't done that yet, but I do know that that is the oldest section, so it should be the first to go.
Okay, so I would amend or revise,
Offer an amendment?
reword the motion so that we're not tying it to a specific dollar amount to be returned.
Thank you.
Mhm.
But that we say what initiative we'd be supporting. So if we're saying it's the security initiative, you know, if Kelly comes back next month and tells us it's 75,000, then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we know the range of it, and then that allows for the year-end results to finalize and an initiative to be addressed and still return. We have an idea of what the amount is. I don't expect it would be deviating significantly. These are, you know, solid estimates at this point.
How old is that estimate on the security of 86,000?
That's a really good estimate, but it's a pre-COVID estimate, and since
Just over a
COVID,
year, right.
yeah, since COVID, things have really
Gotten
gone
really
dramatically
expensive.
higher.
Lauren, would you support
Yeah.
the concept behind that?
I
Easily.
thought you did that already.
I did, but I still mentioned numbers in it. So I want Dawn to be clear when she puts this motion together, that the motion that was moved by Lauren and seconded by Brian was for the budget committee to support the security, the HVHS main office security renovation listed under priority 4, and the remaining amount of the unreserved fund balance to be returned to
Yes,
taxpayer.
I would amend my motion.
Okay.
And I'm good with
So that's
that.
the motion that we're going with. Again, moved by Lauren, seconded by Brian. So again, the concept is there, but it allows the dollar values just to fluctuate.
So now we have the 3 items in.
No, we're still back to, that was to
That was
address
just the
the
one.
original motion.
So
Are
we
you
need an
making an
amendment.
amendment, Raul, that you would like to?
Well, you have to vote on his first.
Right.
No,
No.
Before we can
we
make-
don't.
No?
No, his motion is on the floor.
We're
We can now
discussing
offer
it.
amendments
You
to
So I'm
can
gonna
it.
offer an
offer an
amendment.
amendment to
Okay.
include the tech plan
Phase-
year 3
Year 3 tech plan.
and the roof replacement, the oldest section. of
For the
of
middle school.
Right.
Okay.
And I would support those 3 items to be paid out of the unassigned fund balance.
Okay.
With no dollar amount on that, is that what you're talking
That's
Right.
correct.
So now Raul's motion is to amend the previous motion and support the security upgrade to the office, the middle school oldest roof section replacement, and the moving up phase 3 of the high school tech plan.
And the rest of the amount to be returned to the taxpayers.
Right.
Now can Brian amend that?
I don't have a
Well,
second.
we
Wait, I
have
need
to
a
vote on
second.
that first before you can make any
I'll
other
second
amendments.
that.
Okay, that's seconded by Cindy. Okay,
Yeah.
so the new,
Guidance.
Well,
motion,
The amendment, the
Right.
proposed amendment.
the proposed amendment, do we have to vote on?
We
the
have to
proposed-
vote on the amendment
If that
first.
doesn't pass, does that, that,
If that doesn't pass, then we're back with the original motion.
right, so discussion on Raul's amendment.
Amendment.
I would hope that that roof replacement would be part of a bond issue that would cover a lot of these maintenance things that we've put off.
Right.
And then the
Band-Aid.
people who are in town for the next 10 years paying off the bond would be the benefactors of that maintenance, rather than the taxpayers that happen to be here today.
Which are likely to be here next year too, I mean, in the next 10 years.
Maybe. He's like-
So I would argue
Kids out
against
on
your
the-
amendment.
If we live that long.
Okay, Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to propose the security items, the oldest section of the middle school roof and the tech plan to be funded through the unreserved fund balance? All those in favor? Opposed? So it's 3-5-0. The motion fails.
I tried.
Well, just for discussion purposes, the two things that I said at the board meeting was the tech plan and the security. But at the same time, I feel like that I have to support the administration, and they've done a lot of research and stuff into it, and I think that they know what needs to be done, and the way that they put it in, I think that that's, the way that we should kind of look at it. So I didn't go as far as the roof, but I would have supported the
so
roof as well.
Are you making offering another amendment, or are we back to the original?
I guess you're back to the original.
Back
I
to
just
the
wanted
original.
to explain why I voted against.
Okay. Okay, so we're back to the original motion, which is to support the security features. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 6 opposed? 6-2. Okay. So,
I had to vote against it, so I could vote for it. Is that what, something like that?
That's what you do. Yep. And you gotta pass it before you know what's in it.
That's right.
Right.
No, well,
So, I mean, I think we do still have an opportunity to, review it again in June, as we see, as you get closer to the, to the final results, more things come out of the encumbrance column and close things out. And it could be a different discussion that we have in June.
Is that the school board's decision? That doesn't have to,
Yes.
okay, so the town
No.
has no say, yes or nay, no, nothing. The school board says, yes, we have 1.4, this is what we choose to spend it on.
They could choose to spend all of it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom?
I don't know what gave me pause was when Kelly said that there's this energy initiative, and that plus a bond would be too much. I'd like to have a little more flesh on that, because it was persuasive to me, even though I have always supported putting these things into a bond. So if you could, I don't know if you, not now, but I mean, at the
Okay.
next discussion, expand on, that was an important piece that you just threw in.
Yeah, I flew it in, yeah.
I don't mean
No.
offensively.
No, I know, I was just, that was cute to me. No, I mean, the lease is the way to go now. It's kind of a new thing, if you will. Hollis has funded their 2 projects via a lease,
Yeah,
and it gives you a lot more flexibility, and rather than a bond, so.
I was on the Hollis board when that happened, so
Okay.
I'm familiar with that
Okay.
piece. It was the two together.
Right, because
In one district meeting, that, that I was viewing as problematic.
okay,
And that perhaps a little expansion on might be helpful to everybody.
yeah, that would be great
Yeah,
to
and
do that as well.
It's worth
yeah.
the conversation too, because, first there was a change in, RSA that now makes bond thresholds at 60%, whether you're SB2 or not. So it's no longer a 67% threshold if you're not an SB2 community. It's 60% across the board. But I would like to also understand, I just don't recall, I thought a municipal lease required just a simple majority, is that true, right?
It does.
I think so, and then, but the bonding is the 60%.
That's correct.
Percentage, so those are all things we can kind of just reinforce
Right.
as we have that
And as
discussion.
Cindy said, the school board does not appear to be in favor of a bond in any way. So that could become an issue as well.
Has
I
the
guess.
district ever had a lease for the school?
Not co-op, no.
No,
Okay.
the,
Is it that new?
It's newer, definitely, and it's really tied to energy efficiencies, at least right now it is. So Hollis has been able to do a number of things that aren't necessarily energy efficient under that heading because they've packaged it all together with many things that are, so.
Reconciliation. Oh, excuse me.
You're digressing, right?
Mhm.
That is outside voice?
Okay, so you'll take that back. I'll send a
Yeah.
note to Holly, letting her know where the budget committee fell
Yeah.
on this, and that will, again, I think it's an ongoing discussion as we move into June as well.
Absolutely.
I do, as a reminder, we typically don't meet in July, and have our kind of summer off, and we meet like the fourth week of August. So I would say June is the I think the board would be making maybe its decision on the encumbrances finally in July. That it's July meeting, or?
I'm hoping June,
You're hoping
because
June,
I need
okay.
to move on these things, or they're not happening.
Yeah, that's true too, that's true too. Mhm. And I think you just, even with the $30,000 for the expanded, study, I think could probably be covered somewhere in the existing budget due to the other savings and things like that. So it obviously doesn't take it out of, it's going to be done. I just think
Yes.
it could be funded in, within the budget that we just passed.
Yeah, it could,
So-
definitely.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the facilities overview. It's, again, kind of tied to things we were just talking about, and I appreciate Kelly bringing it up. You spend the spring looking at food service and facilities, switch them up in order, sometimes don't talk about them due to COVID, and so it's nice to know we're like meeting again and getting back on track. So thank you, Kelly, for getting the audit together, sharing it with us, and if you could kind of lead us through some of the things we'll be looking at, that'd be great.
Okay. And so our evaluation methodology on the facilities assessment has not really changed. One change, important one, a big one, at least for me, is the addition of our new facilities director, Lance Finnemore. He's done a fabulous job this year. It's been a learning experience for him on how we do things, and he's got all 3 districts to learn. So it's been quite an adventure for him, but he's now a big part of this analysis in every district. And we use, I'm sure you recall me talking about the facility audit tool.
Question,
Yes,
can we invite him to a future meeting?
absolutely. If you'd like to meet him, I'm
Yeah, please.
happy to do so. Okay. Is there a particular one you would like him to come to?
No, whatever is convenient for everyone.
Probably in the fall as we
Fall,
kind
yeah.
of bring up the CIP and things
Yep,
like that.
okay,
Part
that
of the
sounds like a
budget-
perfect.
Part of the
September,
budget, part of the
Okay.
budget discussion. I don't think we've ever, we haven't had a person to bring, so.
Yes, we haven't.
Kelly
looking at
has.
it.
Kelly's been juggling all of it, so.
Okay, so our facility audit tool is a spreadsheet, and we have the building maintenance supervisors in every district use this tool, and there's a number of systems in their building that we ask them to evaluate both on two categories, on functional condition and on any safety and compliance concerns, and there's a point system to it. And when those 2 categories are merged into 1 point, total points, then those, anything on the facility audit tool rated 5 points or less makes it to the first round of the budget, which you guys typically don't have to go through. And then there are cuts made at that point, or we push them to another year, or, whatever the case may be. So this year, and I was thrilled when I saw this, because I'm used to seeing page after page after page of concerns, and we are down to 2 pages for the middle school and 2 pages for the high school for concerns. So we're making progress. But none of these are really new things. For the middle school, you would have seen on the report some HVAC issues like valves, controls, fans that I don't think were there last year. The old section of the roof that we've already talked about. Those are probably the newest things that have come to the middle school list. As far as the high school list, you'll see the EOL notification, which is end of life, and we are approaching that on some of our HVAC equipment on our security system in the high school, and we know that because of the amount of repairs that have to be made on these systems. And otherwise, I don't think there's a lot of new things. There is one other thing on the high school that was new, and that's kitchen equipment. It was starting to show its age as well. So there are a number of repairs that we are dealing with in that area.
Kelly,
Yes.
does the amount that we received as reimbursement, does that help at all with any of the kitchen equipment, or is it, oh, I guess that's part of the food discussion that we would have next month, to see how all of that worked out, so maybe I'll just hold that
Yeah,
question. I'll just hold on to that one.
But to answer your question, I don't think any of it really qualifies under the definition of that funding.
Okay.
You know, it's more like it's just getting old and
Yeah.
not holding temperatures
Yeah.
and, you know, things like that.
Mhm.
So normally we just have one straight plan of attack, and that's to assign everything to our capital improvement plan for the budget process. But as we've already discussed, we've also added a Plan Attack A, which is the energy efficiency study. And as I said, I think during the previous discussion, that the results of that should be able to tackle, or kill two birds with one stone, some of the end-of-life issues as well as our energy efficiency issues. So at the end of the day, our capital improvement plan is broken out into under 20 and over 20. And in the report that I did provide, I've broken up what we plan to do in FY22, and all of those things are scheduled to happen. Hopefully, there won't be delays due to all the issues we're seeing in Hollis, so hopefully we'll be able to get all of the things scheduled for FY22 done in FY22. And then we've identified all of the things that came out of the facility audit tool. Those are in FY23 at this point, but as you see us go through the budget process, I'm sure those will be shifted to other years depending on a deeper dive of analysis that we'll do, and a deeper dive in cost estimates, because these are very ballpark figures as we go through this process. And the capital improvement plan goes out to FY26, as you'll see when you look at that report. And we have identified, and I think we've already mentioned some of these in the previous discussion, some of the potential projects if we were to do the energy efficiency lease, and that would be the LED lighting fixtures, solar panels, either replacement or renovation to HVAC systems. Same with air handling. We might look at propane boilers in both schools as opposed to the heating oil that we currently have. And there may be new cooling options that we can look at as well, because we do know certain floors of the high school are pretty brutal at certain points in the year. So right now, if we totaled the under 20 and over 20 based on the facility audit tool analysis, those two combined were at $794,000. But as I said, I am confident many of those will get shifted to 24, and some of 24 will get shifted to 25 during that budget process. Other continuing discussion areas, and I don't think any of these are new for you guys, would be discussing the egress at the high school, security upgrades, which one of those things is what you guys have recommended, parking and paving issues, storage solutions, the middle school water solution, and the elevator, which, you know, we knock on wood every day and hope it continues.
We do have some money put aside for that, so.
Yes, we have like roughly half of what it would cost to repair that, so that's a good number.
And all those repairs and things that you discussed in this last thing, if we just kept the kids homeschooled, right?
Well, we certainly have the time for it, yes. And that's all I have.
Great. Anyone questions? I do agree, it is a shorter list than it has been.
Yes, I was.
And if you go back and look at FY22, I mean, there are a significant number of things that are, you know, being addressed.
That we
so-
are
Good.
knocking off the list. I
So
love
that's
it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what we do, as you said, you go through a further prioritization process as we go into the budget cycle to try to kind of mitigate those bumps and, you know, even
Yes.
things out.
We
So-
do try to do that as much as we can.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, as usual, if there are any other questions or something comes to you later, we can forward them my way and I can get them to Kelly. and we
Yes,
can
please.
address them also.
Let me just make a comment, something that bothers me, and that is, year after year, we seem to have a very large amount of money being returned back to the available, unassigned fund balance, for one reason or another. And it seems like maybe one way to start reducing that is to start baselining our budget guidance on the actuals, not on the budget from the previous year. Otherwise, we're gonna continue to have this big delta all the time, and then we're gonna get into this discussion of trying to, take advantage of the situation by maybe funding some things. I'm not saying that don't need to be funded, but maybe that suggests a different method than what we actually should follow, which is when there are major items like this to be brought back to the taxpayers. So I would like us to consider in the next budget cycle for us to use the actual dollars that were used as the starting point. And if the number happens to be 6% or 5%, so be it, we'll discuss it. And if there are major good items and that justify the increase, so be it.
Well, my response to that would be, other than this year and last year, I think what we've returned to the taxpayer is not far from what we've expected to return to the taxpayer. Maybe a couple $100,000 over, but in a budget of that size, to be that on target with a budget, I think is impressive. And as Darlene had mentioned, we have not come before either governing body, with a list of encumbrances to fund, because we've done such a good job at budgeting.
And I totally agree with that. I mean, I
But
totally
the
agree.
last 2 years are an anomaly. COVID-19 has thrown a bomb in everything, so I don't think it's fair to compare the last 2 years to that. But I think prior to that, Darlene has given us a list of many years of fund balance returned to the taxpayer, and I think it's been fairly reasonable, especially because we usually budget for either $200,000 or $300,000 to be returned. So anything over that would be what you're talking about.
Right.
And do we have a list somewhere of last 10 years, aside
Yep.
from these two?
She does.
Yeah,
And
I can,
that,
I've
you know,
shared
just
it with
to-
Yeah, there was
everyone.
a chart in the briefing that had that
Yeah, I'll-
information.
I'll update it with, I can do it with the estimate that we have so far. Because, and what I did was track, it's at least 10 years worth, and the effect that would have had on the tax rates of Hollis and Brookline. So when we hear things like the co-op never returns anything, we can look at the amount and we can see what impact that would have had on a tax bill. It's not inflation adjusted, but we could see what impact it had on a tax bill by returning that amount.
Right.
So, for example, like, your tax bill would have been X dollars higher had we not returned it.
And I
type
think
of thing.
this year, with this big number that's being discussed, everybody's gonna hear that now, like I said, they're gonna hear that number and automatically say, well, we've never got money back before.
Well, and
Peanuts,
that-
and this is, and again, it's 2 years anomaly, but I just think we need to be prepared with them to back it and say, okay, the last 10 years was this, yes, COVID, we did this and this.
And that's part of the reason why, as we move from the public hearing to the annual meeting, I asked Kelly to see if there was updated information that could be shared, because due to COVID, the prior year, we had returned a significant amount, and then when we dropped that down from $1 million to 200,000, that's $1 million difference. It has a significant impact on the
Right.
tax rate.
And
So that's why, looking at it and saying like, what, I want you to legitimately, like, can that be an amount that's returned? I don't want us to go out on a limb. I could have held it at the 200,000 and gone forward with that, but if we legitimately felt like, there's a better estimate from when we were in our planning phase to where we are, because we had that extra month before we needed to do the presentation, can we provide that information?
Right.
But, yeah, but it does get, diluted with other things that happen in somebody's tax bill.
And
So,
like I said, the last year and a half with the COVID, all from townspeople and whatnot, friends, like, what are we saving, what are we getting back? So this is gonna be the concentration 2 years, so I think we have to show 8 or 10 previous, saying this is typical, this is untypical, this isn't gonna happen again.
Mhm.
Cause I mean, right now, they're looking, okay, 1.3, 1.4 million, they want it back.
Mhm.
Well, whatever the school board decides, and the administration, to give back or to spend on things that, like, part of the roof that nobody voted for yet.
Right.
You were saying, or actually Tom was saying, bond it, like bond the whole roof, fix the whole roof. And again, I have full confidence in the school board and your administration to do what you need to do, but I'm just saying, from what I'm hearing, from what I see, there's a huge number out there, 1.4 million, that's all anybody heard tonight.
Mm-hmm,
Why aren't we getting that back?
right.
And then they're not gonna think that, oh yeah, we got 80,000 back, or 110,000 back
Right.
last year, but it's, nobody cares or remembers what they got back for the last 8 years, it's these 2 years that all anybody's focusing on,
Mhm.
you know?
So Raul, you brought up the concept that you're talking about, I think as we were partially through the planning phase, or, as we had kind of already started, and I think maybe had done preliminary guidance. But what I could do in August, so I understand the point, and as I said, you've brought it up at least through the last budget cycle, but the issue is, we can't take FY21 actuals and build an FY23 budget, because we approved things as we moved into FY22. So we would have to take FY21 actuals and overlay what we estimated were the changes that were approved, like a new contract, a change in NHRS, and things like that, to arrive at an adjusted actual. So, but my point is, I thought we did that, and I'll have to go back and look at old files, as we went through this past budget cycle, and we were about $150,000 apart. But I can do a more careful view in August before we get into the planning phase.
Or maybe we can arrive at a standard methodology
Something
that we
like-
can
yeah,
then
to
all
just-
share and understand.
Exactly, so if we do that in August, it's kind of as we're ramping up into the budget cycle, we can have a conversation about it and see if that's a better methodology that, there might be something to it that, from the business office perspective, you might say, okay, yeah, that does give us a little bit better if we just
I
kind of
totally believe in
look at
having
it.
flexibility in the process, because your hands should not be tied. And I accept the hard analysis that you go through to come up with these recommendations or suggestions. But at least the concept of going back to the actuals, to the last starting point, and then adding maybe the other factors that are beyond our control to come up with some initial baseline is a reasonable approach that I think most people understand, and we should have something like that.
And I think when we talked about it, we said it was not so significantly different, and the results of the prior year were COVID-related, and so it was harder to,
To compare,
to
right.
compare. So that's why we went with the methodology that we have. So maybe, we can look at it again and have the discussion. That's a perfect time, I think, in August to do that.
Yeah, personally, I have some concerns with the suggested methodology. This might not be the time to go into a depth discussion, but we should have a discussion about that at least.
Yeah, and if you do have a different suggestion or concern about it,
Yeah.
that you'd like to share now?
Sure. My concern is just that if we base one budget based on the actuals from the previous, it creates a disincentive to save, because if you don't spend money right now, then you're going to be penalized by your budget next year is going to be lowered. You've got to keep that into consideration.
On the
when
other
you're doing
hand,
your
we trust our
things.
superintendent and we trust our
Yes.
principals, and therefore I am willing to accept, I trust them.
Yep.
And so I'm willing to accept whatever happens.
I
And there is,
I certainly-
and this is all transparent,
Yep.
and we can always learn about how they go through the budgeting process
Mhm.
and estimation and all that, which I
Yep.
think is reasonable. And
Yep. I think we all trust them, but we also want to acknowledge that we're kind of building in disincentives into the method, into the process
that's a
for
risk.
it. And that's something we would want to have a discussion about.
I agree with you.
with me?
No, with Brian.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I got you earlier.
He's alternating.
Just one thing too that I forgot to mention, just to put on your radar, the bus contract will be renegotiated, and we just formed a committee at the SAU level to work on that. Awesome.
Was that 3 years already?
Wow.
Yeah, this next year is our third year.
With the new company.
With the new company, so that needs to be on everybody's radar.
Mhm. Yep.
That'd be
No
another
more,
increase.
no more
I think we
Hollis bus transportation.
So you might have 5 items on your priority list.
They need cargo vans for some of that transportation. Okay. Okay.
And again, if the kids stay homeschooled,
Settle down, settle down,
You
Dave.
still have to run the buses, just not as many.
why do you have to?
Because you still have kids that want to go, they can't
No,
stay.
no, we'll give an
No,
option,
you-
stay
oh,
home.
you don't give them an option, okay.
Cindy, were there any other school board items?
Well, we formed a couple of committees, that being one of them. Another committee that's being formed is looking at compensation for administrative and building administrators. It's getting to a point where we're concerned that we may be losing people to other districts eventually if we don't at least look at it. So we're doing a study on that.
Is that at the co-op level or the
The
SAU level?
SAU brought it forward, and each is gonna have a member, so
Okay,
we had a member assigned to that.
okay. What was the other one? You said
Health
the bus,
insurance.
that one?
And the
Health
health,
insurance.
benefits.
Health insurance, that's it.
Yeah.
I think Tom Solomon
Tom.
had mentioned that.
Yeah.
Those are going down.
What was that called?
Compensation, it was
No, it
just,
was the
It
health
used to be called
benefits
the
working
benefits
group?
working
Benefits
group.
working group,
Yeah.
that's it.
so those 3 topics are gonna be looked at this year.
Okay.
And I think the report for a couple of them was asked, I'm not on any of them, I think a couple of them were tasked to be done by October.
Oh,
So
great.
we have information for budget season.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, I did also share the audit report for last year's audit. I believe we typically have Tim Green come to our August meeting. Is everyone still interested in inviting Tim to our August meeting to review the audit? So if you could invite him to that meeting, that would be great. That would be,
Are there any plans
The
to go back to
26th.
100% in-class teaching? Or has that been discussed at all?
I
Or-
believe so, yeah, I mean,
That's the
That's the
plan.
working
unless
plan.
something
For next year,
changes.
right?
mhm.
right.
Starting in August.
There may be some exceptions we have to make for certain students that might be compromised, but
Okay.
as far as I know, it'll be 100%, yeah.
Okay. One other thing I'd like to discuss, we talked a little bit earlier in the year about different legislative initiatives, and a lot of them are still wending their way through processes and votes, but I would like to share that one of the updates I saw this week was that as of May 20th, House Bill 484, which was the one that would have limited budget committee votes on non-monetary petition, regular or special warrant articles, was killed in the Senate. It had passed the House and was killed in the Senate. And I don't recall the bill number for the SB2 bill that would have allowed for voting on SB2 through absentee ballot and basically at our regular voting session in the communities was also killed by the Senate. There's a third bill that was put forward by Kat McGee, which would allow, the way the current legislation stands is that for a cooperative school district, if after 5 years, you have to vote to change an apportionment formula in order to freeze it for the next 5 years. She put a bill forward at the request of the moderator that said basically a vote to keep to affirm and maintain the apportionment formula would be enough to reset the window to freeze it for 5 years. That's moving through, and it looks like it has, it passed the House and passed the Senate, and looks like it's yes, which way did she do it? Was she House? No,
She's in the House.
So it passed the House, and it has an ought to pass from the Senate, so that's moving forward in a positive
So the
direction.
scenario there is if you were to have a vote and it fails, then what?
Well, you eventually have to have a vote that passes something. So this
Right.
was just to ensure if your community is happy and supports your current apportionment formula, and you vote that way, taking the action to maintain it is enough to kind of
But
reset the
there has to be a
clock.
backup plan, otherwise what happens? There's a
Well, yeah,
delay
somebody-
for 1 year,
no.
or what,
Well, no,
Well,
if
it
it were to
just continues.
fail, then
Continues.
you have to put something forward.
Right.
Well,
Someone
you
would
don't,
make a
but-
motion to amend or put another initiative forward at like a special meeting. Like it would still have to be voted on at a meeting.
Well, so
You
if
can't,
it
you
fails,
can't not take an action. Like
So-
you cannot take an action and risk every year someone requesting that it be brought forward. But if you bring it forward after your 5-year window and the community, the legislative body votes to maintain it, then you can keep it. If they vote to change it, that change also is in place for 5
but
years.
if you don't have a plan in place that you can vote right away, then what happens? Does
No,
does that delay for 1 year, or,
No, you would just be having a meeting where if that motion were to fail, you know what, actually, wait, now that you're saying that, I don't know what happens. You don't have to technically pass something.
No,
right,
you
could
can
bring it
if
back
the
to
motion,
next
if the
year.
motion
It
fails,
continues.
then it's as though you never brought it up in the first place.
Right.
And it
But
might
if
or
you're at the
might
end-
not
but
be
if-
brought up again the next
but if you're
year.
at the end of your 5-year cycle,
Yep,
then that doesn't automatically suggest that the 5-year cycle gets renewed automatically.
no,
just
it
one
doesn't,
year.
no.
So therefore, you
If you
don't have
voted down
now
this
that.
Now it's eligible to be voted on
And
for
then you gotta
next year.
start from
Which is
scratch
kind of normal.
to renegotiate the formula.
You don't
No,
have to.
No, you would, if.
In other words, you cannot just continue to vote on the same thing until it passes.
Oh, right, I see what you're saying. So if you made a motion, if a motion failed to maintain it, what is then in place? That's
Exactly.
what you're saying.
And there needs to be
And
some
that
sort
might
of
be in the
mandate to
that
develop a
might very
backup
well
plan.
be in the legislation.
What would be in place?
We'll have to evaluate that.
Okay.
So it's just a,
After it passes, you'll know what's in it.
yeah, exactly. It's all up there. You can find it. If you
That
go through
applies to a lot of things.
if you go to Legisland and just put cooperative school district apportionment, it'll pop up, and I wish I could remember the bill number. So, there was that. Just a note for the June meeting, we would normally be meeting on the 4th week, which is the 24th. I personally have a conflict and I'm not available on that day, so, you can certainly meet without me.
No, we can't.
Or if you're interested, we can, change the meeting date to possibly the week before, the 17th.
Could we do it on a different night?
Not that week. I'm not
You're gone
available
the whole-
for that week.
Mm,
And is
Or
it,
it could go to the week after, the 28th, 29th, 30th.
well,
Yeah,
we
4th
can
of
have it,
July.
just like we're having this meeting, we can have it on July 1st, which would be the
You could,
next
yes, you can
week
have
of
it,
July
yep,
4th.
Yep.
Everybody will be very jovial, everybody will be paying attention, everybody will be comfortable.
Everyone will have their cars packed
Right.
for the July 4th weekend.
June. Oh. So, yeah, July 1st would be fine.
Is everyone good with that?
As long as you're here, we're good.
I'm good, I'll be here. Okay,
6:30, I assume? or-
yes. And then August 26th would be our meeting after that. Okay, process observer, I don't see any other items or issues. Anyone? No? Mr. Enright?
I think we, the hell is the time?
Excuse me?
He's trying to fix this.
It's
Calendar.
7:58.
We accomplished the meeting in an hour and a half in spite of Raul constantly interrupting things. It was a very efficient meeting.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn
So moved.
from Lauren, seconded by
Brian?
Brian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
It is great to see everybody again.